Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's special Last Post ceremony. My name is Yana Johnson, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Warrant Officer Cherie Thayers. We warmly welcome the family of Captain Wilson Stewart, whose story will be told shortly. We warmly welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland. We would also like to take a moment to consider and pay respect to the many professional and volunteer firefighters who are out in the thick of the bushfires, working in the most challenging and dangerous of conditions to keep people, places and communities safe. We thank you for your commitment and service, which reflects the essence of the Australian spirit, a spirit that we also showcase here in the stories at the Australian War Memorial. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which he remained true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they love, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story of just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. Following the reading of the story of Captain Wilson Stewart, his family members will lay wreaths at his photograph.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Captain Wilson Stewart. Wilson Stewart, commonly known as Bill, was born in Sydney on the 19th of April 1909. The youngest of three children of Henry and Marion Stewart. He was educated at Waverley Public School and Sydney Boys High School. After matriculation, he studied accounting while working for a large Sydney company. During this time, he met Lucy Paynes, a secretary in the same company. A relationship blossomed, and Lucy and Bill were married in May 1935. In April 1937, their only son, Roderick, was born. Soon after, they bought a house on Harbour Street in Mossman. As a young man, Bill, a keen cricketer, played for Northern Districts Cricket Club. He was a fast bowler and received a number of awards. He was also a good rifle shot and took part in competitions, winning awards and trophies. He joined the militia in 1929, initially serving as a signaller in the Coastal Artillery Battery in the Sydney area. In 1933, he was given a commission and transferred to the 2nd Division Signals. Bill Stewart was working as an accountant when the Second World War began, and he immediately applied for a commission in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force. His low service number, NX96, testifies to his early acceptance into the Army. He was gazetted as a lieutenant on the 13th of October 1939 and was posted to the 6th Division Signals Regiment. Stewart embarked from Sydney on the 9th of January 1940 aboard the transport ship Otranto, bound for the Middle East. After disembarking at Egypt in mid-February, he was seconded to the 2nd 1st Field Regiment, but returned to his unit a week later. At the end of April, Stewart and a section of signallers were attached to the 2nd 1st Field Regiment, which was then based at Castina. The regiment began to move the following day to Bir Asluj, where some 23 years earlier the light horse had ridden towards Beersheba. As the 1st Field Regiment began training in earnest for the fighting ahead, Stewart was promoted to captain on the 11th of June and given command of J Troop, 6th Division Signals Regiment. He and J Troop returned to their unit later in the month. Italy declared war on Britain in June 1940, and in September, an Italian force crossed from Libya into Egypt. The Italians were brought to a halt at Sidi Barrani and forced into Libya. As the Australian 6th Division began its move out of Palestine towards the Western Front desert, Bill Stewart sent what would be his final letter home. By December, the Australian 6th Division had concentrated around the Italian-held fortress at Bardia in Libya. A number of raids were conducted against the fortress in an attempt to force the Italian garrison to surrender or withdraw. But when it became evident that the Italians meant to stand and fight, plans were made to assault and capture the fortress. During the night of the 2nd and 3rd of January 1941, Bill Stewart and other officers marked out the start line for the attack. In the early hours of the 3rd of January, Bill Stewart was sharing a foxhole with Major Ian Campbell, the brigade major of the 16th Brigade. They watched the preparatory bombardment, which began at 5:30 a.m. Australian engineers blew gaps in the Italian defensive wire using Bangalore torpedoes, and then the Australian attack began. Bill Stewart and Ian Campbell rose from their foxhole and joined the infantry in its advance. The Australians immediately came under Italian rifle, machine gun and mortar fire and began taking casualties. After making his way through the wire, Bill Stewart stood up to continue his advance when he was hit. One of his men, signaller Ken Clift, later wrote that his officer was hit in the left arm by 3 machine gun rounds, which entered his chest and killed him instantly. Clift went to assist Stewart, who was lying face down, and when he rolled Stewart over and checked for wounds, he noticed a small shrapnel wound in the officer's forehead. Bill Stewart had been highly respected and revered by his men, and they felt his loss keenly. He was 31 years old. The Australian 6th Division suffered 221 men killed that day, 19 of whom were officers. These men were the first of the 2nd AIF to be killed in combat in the Second World War. On the 14th of January 1940, Lucy Stewart was hosting a morning tea for friends at her home in Mossman when the telegram announcing her husband's death arrived. One can only imagine the sense of utter devastation she must have felt on receiving the news. Bill Stewart was initially buried at Bardia, but after the war, the Bardia Cemetery, along with a number of outlying cemeteries, were consolidated into the Halfaya Solemn War Cemetery. Bill Stewart's name is listed on the Roll of Honour amongst almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today here in Anzac Hall. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Captain Wilson Stewart, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand and remove hats for the reading the ode and the sounding the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières, or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they'll be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. Tonight, our piper will play a lament for you, Flowers of the Forest, as you leave Anzac Hall. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening.